I'm comfy in my sweatpants and my Spirit jersey. So let's get started on a video talking about piping and how we can use this in handbag making. So what is this stuff anyway? Basically, piping is bias tape that has a little rope inside of it. Not yarn, because yarn is extremely stretchy and can pull apart with a lot of pressure, but actually like a nice string inside. And while you can make your own for the purposes of this video, I went ahead and I picked up this package from my local craft store, so you can see what this is. You can get these at most big crafting stores or small ones. I mean, whatever floats your boat. Because personally, I actually don't use piping. This is all dependent on the kind of bag that you're making and like the style that you want to present. For a lot of people, they like to use piping on bowler style bags, more retro styled bags, something that kind of wants to give a pop to the bag. You usually get it with like a complementary color, but something to give it a little more contrast and to make it stand out. So I've got a couple of strips of vinyl fabric that I'm going to use. I'm actually going to use my domestic machine today. You can see I've got the camera. When I don't block it with my butt, you can see I've got the camera set up. I'm going to use the domestic on this. And that's because I advise that you use a zipper foot, which I'll be able to explain a little bit more in detail right now. Okay, so here we have our bias tape with piping inside. We have 2 strips of Sailor Moon vinyl by Cosmic Fabric Creations. And I'm just gonna go ahead and open up the package with very little fingernails that I do have left. Thank you for Violin. And show you what we've got. So the reason that you want this to be bias tape is because it needs to have a little give. Oftentimes you'll want to go around curved edges. Now for the purposes of this video, we're keeping it simple, very short and sweet, and to the point. Now with the piping, there's various sizes, but typically you're going to have about a ½ inch of space to work with. And the thing that you need to do, and the reason I suggest that you go with a zipper foot, basically, is because, let me see if I can get something out here to point at it a bit more. God, I love getting this camera. This is a GoPro now, by the way. You need to stitch all the way up to the edge of that piping. If you don't, then this piping stitch that's kind of built in when you make the piping or purchase the piping is going to show on the other side. So you want to try to get as close as you can to the actual piping itself. The other thing is because you don't want too much of this tail showing on the final product. The tail being like this, think of this as your seam allowance. You don't want this popping out. You want it as flush as humanly possible to the seam and your final product. So I have here 2 pieces of vinyl. You don't have to do this with vinyl. You can do it with regular fabric. I've just seen it mostly used with vinyl. I'm gonna go ahead and cut off a piece of this piping, and we're gonna set it in here. And one thing that would help if you don't want it to wiggle around is to get double-sided tape. This is leather tape that I use. I always have to kind of spend a little extra time to find out where the end of it is, but I'm going to put a little bit on the actual fabric itself. Man, where'd all my little scissors go? I like put everything away and now I can't find anything. It's great. It's great. It's awesome. It's professional, totally professional. So we're going to peel that away. This helps a lot. You don't have to use this. Again, I just like to give a lot of little tips. And I'm going to put it, the edge of the bias tape portion flush to the raw edge of the vinyl with the piping toward the inside on the right side. So like you're sandwiching the piping in between the right side and the wrong side of the vinyl. So when you open it up, you're like, ta-da, piping on that edge. So then I can take clips Don't use pens if you're using vinyl, by the way. Kind of goes without saying. And I'm gonna just clip it in place. And another thing that could be helpful is you could take a pen, again, I can't find anything in my room, and just kind of mark down where it is. Now, sometimes you're fine just, you know, without doing this. Just use your foot to kind of figure out what your allowance is for stitching, but that can also help guide you. Sometimes it's hard. What you want to avoid doing is actually stitching into the piping itself, but also not leaving too much of the seam allowance of the piping visible once you flip it right side out. So it's kind of go slowly, don't feel like you're in a rush, and stitch it. So this again is for just how you would basically use it. I'll bring it up to the camera so you can see. So this is just basic use for piping. I will show you after stitching this what you do when you have, when you're going around a piece and you need to close the ends off. So I'll show you that, but let's get through this part first. So you can see here that I've installed a zipper foot, and this is my domestic machine. And I am going to set my stitch, once I move the thread to the back, I'm going to set my stitch to be over to the left side. And so you can see like the foot, once I place the work underneath it, the foot is not going to be on top of the rope of the piping at all. So I'm going to have full clearance to do what I need to do here. So we're going to go ahead and start this stitch anytime now. And continue, and just be very careful and go very slowly. Ah. And we'll finish off that stitch. Don't forget to lock your stitches at the start and stop. I'm just going to flex a bit and show you my machine can cut. And then you open it up and you can see the piping right there, evenly done, so that you don't see any of the excess. We didn't run into any of the piping itself, so it's looking pretty darn good. So let's go back to the table, and I'm going to tell you how to deal with these ends when you have this in the round. All right, now that we understand how to do basic piping, let's learn how to tuck the ends in. So let's pretend that these two pieces here are actually a continuous piece, and we have now come around to our piece of work and we're at the bottom of the bag and we need to hide these raw ends. If I could do it this way, there we go. So if we want to hide these raw ends, you don't want to overlap them and you don't want to fold them under like this, because one, it's going to create additional bulk, but the other thing is this little bit here at the end, right here, is still a raw edge, and you don't want to have that visible. So instead, what you're going to do is something very similar to what you do with zipper ends. You are going to, don't fold it up like this, because that's going to create an unnecessary bump right here toward the end of your work. You want to fold inward toward the seam allowance of the actual bias tape. So I'm going to clip this down on the other end just to keep it still. And I'm going to place my finger right here and just pull it up. And you can see how the seam allowance is kind of forming a bit of a fold. And you're going to press that down. This is very similar to quilting techniques. Oh goodness, it would help if it stayed where I put it. Anywho, so again, I'll show you up here. Unfortunately, I can't really zoom with this camera, but we're gonna fold it and press it down so that the seam allowance is up against where you're going to be stitching, but then all the raw edges are toward what would be the interior of the bag, and we're going to clip that down into place. Same thing with the other side. And what you want to do is make sure that you have enough of this. So I tend to leave it so there's tons of slack. So we would have lots of slack supposedly at the end, again pretending that this is connected. And come in here and again put your finger down and pull outward and push that bias tape in. And you want these two pieces here to be right up against each other. I'll show you again up close. So now you want them right up against each other. All right. Raw edges will be gone and these will be taken care of. So now we're going to take our other piece of vinyl and put it on top, carefully lifting the clips so you don't lose those folds that you had right there in the middle. And we're going to go stitch it. Okay, so at the other camera, I realized maybe it wasn't the best view that I was giving you of what to do. The GoPro is great for showing top down of like larger work, but this finer detail stuff I really should do on this camera. So for the sake of the video, I want to make sure you guys can actually see what it is that I did. So again, like here, I'll clip this one out of the way real quick. But it's basically toward the center. What you want to do is put your finger down and pull the bias tape out of the way by the rope. And you can see it's creating this little fold right here. And you take that fold and you press it down. So that is going to be a hidden detail right here with none of the raw edges, because all the raw edges are facing upward. And you're just gonna take a clip and put that into place. So now you can see a little better what it is I was doing. We're going to do the same thing to the other side. Let's put the clip down at the end. So again, the assumption was that this is like stitched down. And I'll move that clip a little further over. Because the thing is, you need these two to butt up against each other. So I'm going to move it out of the way. And they're going to be right up against each other like that. And again, there are a couple of different ways of doing this. So you can have it like this, to where they're up against each other like this. It makes it look like they're kind of veering outward. The other thing you can do is you can actually, instead of folding it down like this, is you can just curve it out of the way. But that, depending on your machine and the type of stitching that you're doing, the fabric that you're using, what it might do is create a gap right here. Actually, let me show you. I'm gonna get the piece, because I did a piece. I recorded this and I was like, oh, that doesn't look good. So you can see, like, even I can't get it just right, but that does not look good. You can see the stitching showing right through here because it created a gap to make room for on the inside where this was coming up. So that's why I suggest to do it the folded way, because it'll be a little more accurate. So the only thing you may want to consider when doing this, I'll get this clip in here. It's hard to do it here when I'm trying to get on camera. It's like, oh, performance anxiety. Anywho, one other thing to consider is just a little bit of fray check if you want, because of this tiny section here, but that's going to be, if you do this right, it's going to be inside your seam allowance, so it's not going to be a big deal. But I'm sure somebody will fuss about it, because there's always at least one person on a video who wants to fuss about something. So let's see, we'll clip that, and we'll clip that. Pull these up and clip those in place, and now we're going to stitch them. Once I pull this down. Okay. And over. Careful to maintain that seam allowance. And we're going to be done. Now, aside from the fact that I'm an absolute idiot and I placed wrong side down, see, even I make mistakes. You can see what it looks like on the other side, how it just very nicely divots in to the wrong side of the fabric right here. Everything is fairly flush, and it provides a really nice look. Now this usually you would do toward the center bottom of the side for the bowler bag. You don't want to have like this up at the top of the bag. Just something toward the base of the bag is less noticeable, but also looks intentional when you do that. So that's how you would hide your raw edges for the piping as you go in the round. Well, there you have it. I hope that helps you understand how to use piping and how to place fabric correctly when you're doing a demonstration video. Was fine. It's fine. It looks good, right? It's great. Anyway, thank you so much for everything. Please feel free to like and subscribe, and let me know in the comments what kinds of techniques you would like to see me do next in videos.